Thanks for tuning in. You are listening to episode 120 of the Brain Software Podcast, coming to you from the Hypnotic World Epicenter, Toronto, Canada. If you're interested in hypnosis, NLP, or personal development, you're in the right place. Today, we continue our discussion of awesome communication techniques that put you in the metaphorical driver's seat. Stay tuned.
Hey, man. What's happening, Peck? Just dropped in from my home in Dimension 15, where it's always 1967 and the summer of love, Scroll. I brought some incense and beads for you, man.
No incense for me unless it's ant-proof, Dr. Ambrose. Remember, you're still just Dave.
Yeah, and my stuck state fascist dick detector says you're still just a dick, Scroll. Have my $25 sent up to the 15th dimension, dude. I am so out of here. Kill Pazixo.
It's another cold day in the third dimension.
We are not Scrolls.
We never were Scrows, Mike. So keep playing that damn song in your head.
Hey, Chris, we need you to ask the question that everybody's waiting for.
Whatever happened to that old tranquility we used to know? So let's get started with the podcast. This is Brain Software, episode 120.
Who would have thought we'd make it this far?
Scare ya? Did you have a Zygarnik effect loop because we didn't say it? Well, here we go, just so you can relax again.
These are days of victory, Scro!
So let's welcome to the Eye of the Storm, Storm Rider number 1, who's sick of shoveling snow. The God Hypnos come to Earth for your deep amusement and benefit. That zany 5,000-year-old wizard,
Frodo.
Mike Mandel.
Oh, thank you, mannish boy.
All right, Mike, we are back, and we are excited to be here for this podcast. Now, we are going to dive straight into some awesome content right after a very short promotional message, because we've been chided again for being too promotional in the podcast. And thankfully, the person that wrote us in a nice email said, well, at least you've gotten back to doing a good job on your podcast and actually adding value and not talking over so much each other. So we're going to continue to work on not talking over each other, because we know it annoys some of you. And if it annoys some of you, then that's too many. So here we go. Let's talk about Wizard School coming up in April, and the Jackwins are coming in from the UK in May. And we want to have you check out MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events to make sure that you are aware of what we're doing in Toronto. It's going to be awesome. So come to our live events. Now, Mike, what do you want to talk about first?
Well, I'm afraid to interrupt you. I'm just sitting on tenterhooks. I want to talk to you. I got a really interesting voice message from Greg Chandler, one of our students, an amazing storm rider who is a therapist, a hypnotherapist. Is it Iowa or Oregon?
Sorry.
He's in the U.S. anyway.
It's Iowa.
Okay. Yeah, he's in the U.S. And he picked up on the session we did on instant influence and talking about Dr. Pantalon's amazing book on how to influence someone in 7 minutes or less.
Yes.
And he has done something that is so freaking clever with it that I said we have to add this to this podcast.
Okay, I'm really looking forward. I've been looking forward to this because I know that he sent us in a voice message. I was, as you know, yesterday, relative to when we're recording this, I was on a plane coming home from San Diego. So I am not up to speed on any of this. So tell me more.
Okay, now remember the whole thing about autonomy, getting the person to give you a number as to how ready they are to change. The entire pattern that we taught recently.
I think it would be podcast episode 118 where we went through that in some depth. Right.
And
actually, there's a blog post too.
17, but yeah.
Check our blog post. It was published in February.
And we did an entire...
February 2019.
Nice. We did an entire live webinar on it for our students as well. So anyway, what Greg did that was so clever was he put a lot of this stuff on the intake form that the person had to answer these questions when they came in. So the client is answering things about, how ready they are to make this change. Why didn't you pick a different number? And the rest of it, he worked into the hypnosis. So he trances them out. He finds out what their outcome is. I don't know his entire protocol, but the basic idea is he goes through some of the pattern in the intake form and the interview form beginning.
Okay.
The rest he does in hypnosis. He'll have them visualize themselves how they want to be and how compelling that. Why do you want that? And now he's bringing in the 5 whys to nail this so the person is themselves coming up with the reason for change.
I love that.
So did I.
Okay.
I said to him, we're putting it in 120. Anyway.
Brilliant work, Greg Chandler.
Very, very good work. And anybody else who's using Dr. Pantalon's principles for instant influence in some unique way, let us know, because I think this is elegant, it's creative, and it's nothing that I ever would have thought of.
And let me make what I said a moment ago a little bit more clear. If you go to our blog, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/blog, and you'll probably find it'll probably still be on the front page. If not, you might have to click to the second page. But you will find our detailed blog post where we summarized the techniques of Pantalon in that instant influence book. And it's a really detailed blog post written and also in video format. So you can choose your preferred mechanism. You can also find method.
Nice.
Format. You
And
can also find it
book.
you can buy his book. It's called Instant Influence. And you can also find our video about it on our YouTube channel. So if you go to the Mike Mandel Hypnosis YouTube channel, you'll find the full video of us explaining this instant influence concept. And I love what it sounds like Greg's done here is incorporate it into the intake and then continue the process with the hypnotic session. So this just shows you can be clever in how you use what you learn, right? You don't have to use it exactly as taught. Okay.
That's fantastic. Now, before I left this morning, I got the think tank out, spun the dials, and you're going to love this. I always take whatever comes up, whatever it is, and we have to apply it. The word today is masticate.
Are you serious?
I am. Now, I know, of course, there's people out there now who are doing a double take saying, what did he say?
Okay, so masticate means to chew.
Yes, that's right.
And you're going to love this. Okay, so a long time ago, it seems like a long time ago, I think I've done one of the closing metaphors on this entire podcast series, which we're now on 120. So 1 out of 120, I've done the closing metaphor.
I'm afraid what you're going to tell here,
Chris.
Well,
I mentioned about... at some point, I mentioned a teacher that I used to have, a high school English teacher named Mr. Anderson. And I don't know if I mentioned this as part of the closing metaphor, but he was a British fellow. And he would, if somebody was chewing gum in the class, he would look right at the person and say, Mr. So-and-so, are you masticating in my class? And
unbelievable.
It was just hilarious because, of course, a bunch of grade 10 high school students thought that was just funny. And I still think it's funny, to be honest. So
Why is that, Chris?
I just want to acknowledge that.
What's funny about it? It's a typical word for... Okay, so how are we going to apply this?
So, yeah. I have to come back to this. It really reminds me of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You've just got to keep doing the work. And if you have a 2-pound steak on your plate and you want to get all that protein into your body, maybe 2 pounds is a bit too much. How are you going to do it? One bite at a time.
I think that is an absolutely
so weird.
Paltry and vapid explication of that word. Just terrible, terrible.
What does it mean to you? What does it make you think of?
To me, I think of my Bull Terrier Lockjaw I used to have, who could bite through a hockey stick. He had immense jaws. And the way I don't know, Chris, I'm just thinking you have to... we have to make sure with this business that we don't bite off more than we can chew. How's that one?
Oh, there you go. Well, that actually makes sense because, as you know, I've just come back from a marketing conference in San Diego, and it's a fantastic conference. And, of course, what do I do on the plane ride home? Well, instead of sleep, I actually pulled out my computer, and I made a list of all the implementation items that we have in the business. It's like 42 or 43 items. It's a very long list.
Quite a conference.
And obviously, I cannot do all of that in a week or two or even a month or two. So it's going to be a question of not biting off too much at once, right? Or recruiting the resources to help do that. So if I can't do it all myself, maybe I can hire somebody else to help us with some of these projects.
Because the metaphor is, if I can interrupt.
Yeah, please do.
The metaphor is, the more irons you have in the fire, maybe that's good, but they all share the heat.
I love that metaphor.
Share the heat.
And that's something that I have learned through history in my life, that if I try to do too many things, I just don't do any one of them really well. And it's basically back to that multitasking problem, right? You really are not designed to multitask.
Right. We are not good at multitasking, regardless of how we think we are.
Yeah. Hey, and I just want to say, I think we're doing a pretty good job of not talking over each other.
I just mentally count to 5 before answering.
That's right.
Okay, let's get into
Okay.
content. We want to talk about stellar communication, the kind of communication that changes other people's minds, that changes your own mind, and that's how that instant influence tied into this. This is our third
of the mini-series.
Right, and we didn't interrupt each other then. It was a beautiful
It's like finishing each other's sentences. It's great.
Like that.
All right, so this is part 3 of the mini-series. We interrupted between part 2 and part 3. We interleaved the conversation with the Jacquins, which was episode 119. So we're back to communication tips, and the first thing on the list is to beware of the word should.
Okay, now just before you get there, I just want to say that I have just demonstrated the most remarkable self-restraint of my life, because a line came to mind in response to something you just said that was so incredibly funny, but it would have probably alienated almost all of our listeners, and the podcast would have crashed and burned forever. So I'm not going to say it. When I'm on my deathbed, I'll reveal what it is or have it put on my gravestone. Now, before we set this up, let's say that everyone has a model of the world. We have, my mentor, Derek Baumer, used to say you should have 3 models of the world.
You should.
So you have choice. And I see what Chris is doing, applying the word should right away. But we have a model of the world that sets our perceptual filters. So remember, we all make sense of the 3 to 20 million bits of information coming in at any given moment by filtering it, by deleting, distorting, and generalizing that information. Consequently, we formulate a worldview, even if it's just, woo, hey, this stuff really comes out.
I should mute my computer.
We formulate a worldview, even if it's just for that context. You go into a party and you have this worldview, your perceptual filters are set. But the problem becomes when we impose our worldview on someone else. Now, the interesting thing is, we can set up perceptual filters that are not accurate and aren't useful. We have to delete vast amounts of information, but the stuff we choose to let in, consciously and unconsciously, is what will vary our own behavior. Case in point, I had a keynote to do for a very large corporation that had about 40 people at a retreat in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And for those of you who don't know Niagara-on-the-Lake, it was actually Jordan Station, which is right near there, near Niagara Falls. It's all wine country. It's a great place. And I got there. I had just come from a training with John Grinder. I went upstairs, and these people were hammered.
You told this story before.
The 40 people were hammered. But this is a perceptual filter.
Yes.
They're all standing at the bar, laughing loud, talking loud. And I thought, I'm doomed. No one's going to listen. No one's going to listen to a keynote, even spoken by me. So I thought, well, okay, let's reset. I went out in the hall, shook it off, changed my state. I went back in and looked at the room fresh. They weren't hammered. Most of them were drinking like club soda and coffee. They were just young people having a good time. And my entire perception, that model of the world, changed at that moment. And I did a great keynote, had a terrific response from them. Now, if I'm carrying a particular view of the world, it is tempting to impose that on someone else.
Especially when it comes to things that you think are important, right? So if somebody's talking about their problem and you have a certain set of values and beliefs, it's so tempting to tell them what they should do based on what you believe, what's important to you.
But the problem is, as soon as we tell someone they should do something, which is often the domain of those Enneagram type 1s out there, like our friend Ryan, when we tell them that, we are now arbitrarily imposing our perceptual filters and our current model of the world. I'm saying current because it shifts on them, on them. So be really, really careful not to should all over people, as Chris says.
Our friend Adam says that. You stop shooting all over me.
Okay.
I love that line.
It's a good one. But recognize that when other people tell you you should do something, you should have a little alarm go off in your head right away.
So let's talk about some alternatives to should, right?
Well, you want to offer options and possibilities.
Yeah. So Pantalon in his book might say, why might it be a good idea to blank instead of you should blank?
Right.
Or you could say you might be able to, as if you're offering an option.
Think of it in terms of someone who's really out of shape. Now, I could say to him, you should get in shape this year. You should do this. You should do that. Right away, his desire for autonomy will kick in, and he'll get his back up. Walls go up. But if I said to him, why might it be a good idea for you to make this a year of health and fitness? That's
Boom.
a totally different thing. That
Autonomy.
opens his mind, and I'm putting no pressure on him.
Yeah.
So watch out for should. And another one is, let's talk about the use of because this is such a powerful, powerful word.
Nicely done. I love the word because. I learned this from you many years ago too. And so the idea here is that if you connect a statement that you want the other person to take as true, or a command that you want them to act on, and you use the word because, and then you provide any reason that it doesn't even have to make sense, doesn't even have to necessarily reason that shouldn't be so stupid that it's a pattern interrupt. Right. Like you literally aren't going to say, go to the store because there are birds on the roof.
Right.
I remember you joked about that back, I think, in 1993 when I first saw you teach this. And the use of the word because is quite effective. So,
well, let's look at the two reasons why. Cialdini says it's because people like a reason for doing things.
We assume that if we hear a reason, then that justifies the request, or the statement is true because we provided a reason that it is true.
But as hypnotists, we take it even further and say, let's be sure that we frame everything in front of the word because as a simple standalone command you could put an exclamation mark after. So you want it to be simple. You don't want to be vague and all over the map with this, indirect speech. You want to say something like, lend me $10 because, I'm always here for you, or whatever it is. The lend me $10 is a command. It's not, I wonder if you'd lend me $10, which is, it's a wondering. It's not, would you be good enough to lend me $10? Because that's a question.
Right.
You want it to be a statement. Now, you don't have to shout it at them,
and it can be a bit abrupt if you don't have rapport.
Yeah.
If you just not shout, but you know what I mean, make this very direct command and provide a reason, it's still packaged as a command. And if there is no rapport, I think it's much more likely to fail. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah. And remember, we used the example, let me in line. Let me in line because, and you give a rationale. And it's much, much more powerful. And you can say it nicely. Like as Chris is saying, you don't have to shout it at the person or sound like a fascist or anything. It's just simply tell them, your intention. And it's a powerful thing because whichever way it works and for whatever reason it works, I've found it to be immensely powerful. Remember I said I had a client who used it to get her son to clean up his room. He hadn't cleaned it in 2 years. She said, clean up your room because we're going out tomorrow. He looked, what? She just repeated it. And he went and cleaned up his room.
Yeah, clean up your room.
Yeah.
Because we're going out tomorrow.
Do you use this stuff with your kids?
Yeah, I've used this.
Does it work?
It most of the time, I'm trying to think and failing to think of the last time I did this, but it does tend to work. I think with the idea of, say, wanting to cut in a line, let me in line, I need to make some copies. This is the old example that comes out of Cialdini's book, in case anyone's wondering, where the scientific experiment was a woman or a man attempting to cut in line at a photocopy machine back in the day when nobody had cell phone cameras that could do the same job for, in your pocket. So by asking and providing a reason, the compliance rate went up dramatically, using the word because and then providing the reason. But the reason was they determined, let me cut in line because I need to make some copies, which is obviously redundant. It's a tautology. Obviously, you need to make copies or you wouldn't be in this line. It's not for your health. But that worked just as well as what you would think is a real reason. Let me in line because I'm in a rush.
Yeah.
Or whatever or
I'm having major surgery.
Like you're not adding, the point being, you're not actually having to add value or new information. You don't need to add new information after because.
And that's why I'm convinced
it will still work.
I'm still convinced it is the embedded command. That's the reason it works.
In a hypnotic language speak, it bypasses the critical faculty. Okay, so now what do you want to say about asking empowering questions?
Well, empowering questions enrich somebody else's map of the world immediately, and it breaks them out of stuck states. And in fact, even what we just said a moment ago, drawing from Pantalon's work of, why might this be a really good idea for you to get in shape this year, whatever it is.
That is an empowering question.
It certainly is, because it's enriching their map. It's opening up the model and getting them out of the stuck state.
Yeah, it comes back to possibility, right? You're communicating the idea of possibilities rather than limitations, which is a really nice way to do things. So why might it be a good idea to get in shape? It gets back to their reasons. It's possibilities and autonomy all in one.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Nice.
So asking empowering questions. Now, how do we usually teach this, Mike?
Well, I teach it that, I've had clients who get in stuck states because they're talking about why. Why did this happen? Why did this happen? Now, why is great when you're looking for new possibilities, but it's terrible if you're trying to solve a problem looking back. Why did this happen? Why am I so stupid? Your brain will just lock down on that. So we were teaching people how to use how questions instead. How can I fix it is way better than why is this broken?
Right.
And that's an empowering question too, isn't it? Remember the ultimate empowering question?
It was something like, how will I learn something new today to make my life better and have an absolute blast doing it? Something like that.
In that case, it was, yes.
But this is yours, right?
But the best one is, what do you want?
Oh, yeah.
Because we want to focus on what the target state is. What do you want? And let's get some visual, auditory, and kinesthetic descriptors. I want to be able to, Tony Robbins jokes and says, someone said, well, I want more money, and hands them a quarter.
Yeah.
You have to be specific with this sort of thing.
So when you're having conversations with people or yourself, internal dialogue, so that's why this always applies to both, right? Working with others, working with yourself.
Right.
One of the best things that you can do is keep people focused on their goals, their target states, rather than discussing the problems in their life. Talk about solutions. Nobody cares about problems. Well, people think about them and care about them, but
some people embrace them.
But if you think about, for example, again, having just come back from a marketing conference, we will, in marketing speak, point out problems to stir the pot, right? To sort of probe them with the sharp object that makes them feel the pain. But then we're going to offer the solution. You get people to take action by offering the solution, not by harping on the problem.
Right. Yeah. And there's a good empowering way of communicating right there that you sort of indirectly alluded to. And it's the whole point that when something is over and has been solved, let go of it. People need exit strategies. They need to be able to drop a subject when the subject is over.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't. They just can't. They keep on and keep on and keep on. I heard this on a radio show years ago. A guy phoned in, and his whole thing was about the British North America Act. I don't even know what the hell that is.
Oh, this is the one where the interviewer could not exit the situation, right?
Well, he couldn't get the guy off the line. It was a call-in show. And he's saying, it's such and such. Oh, okay. Well, I thought it was the British North America Act because, in 1867 they just no, it's not that. And so, okay, because the British North America, and he just kept coming back to it. And
so he couldn't just get the guy to stop.
You've got to have an exit strategy.
Yeah, you have to, because if you can't get the guy to stop talking about it, then you can't move on. And he just wouldn't stop talking about it. What do you
stop
mean?
it?
Here I am doing it to you right now.
So let's talk about getting in the right state for the job. How does that apply?
Oh, that is tremendous. In fact, one of the presentations that I went to in San Diego was a lady who gave an amazing tutorial on making videos. I was thinking, and I mentioned this to our students, that it's really important if you shoot your own videos for social media, for your business, for whatever, it will actually help you become a better communicator. But here's one of the things that she gave as advice that just resonated with what we teach all the time. She said, get in the right zone before you even shoot your video. Take a deep breath, relax, whatever it is, or start, saying great things about yourself and talking about how awesome this video is going to be and how helpful it's going to be for the people who are watching it. That will get you in the zone, right? So that was what it made me think
Right.
of.
Now, I like to think that our method of doing that is vastly superior, which is the one we use with all our training classes. Yeah. And it's Igor Ledohovsky. I gave him this for the use of the students. So he had a takeaway when he interviewed me. And I said, I got this from an obscure book. I can't even remember what book I got it from. But they were talking about you can change a belief by tapping on the back of your hand in the channel between your baby finger and your ring finger with the two fingers of your dominant hand. So you're tapping in that channel and you make statements that are all positive affirmations, and it will change your beliefs. And what I've discovered is it actually brings the right ego state to the executive to match all the things that you are saying. So you want to be in the right state for the job. Let's say you've got to go and sort of one of your kids' teachers who's being a bit of a jerk. So you tap on the back of your hand and you say, I'm assertive without being aggressive. I'm confident. I listen. And you just name this list of all the stuff as though it's present. And you're the laundry list, and the most powerful ego state that matches all of those things will show up for the job.
Yeah, so I said laundry list. I meant grocery list. Like,
it's funny, I didn't question it.
Yeah. Imagine it like a grocery list. If you want to make tacos tonight, you need to go out and buy we don't recommend you eat these by the way, but you need to buy all the ingredients, right?
Right.
And so you're making your grocery list, metaphorical, of the state that you want to be in. You're going to feel powerful, you're going to feel confident, you can feel energetic, whatever it is for the job. By the way, speaking of ego states and Igor Ledachovsky, I want to mention that we set up a really cool little chat bot on Facebook Messenger about maybe a year and a half ago now. And I've actually created a cool little thing where if you go to Facebook Messenger and you want to make sure you're messaging our Facebook page, which is called Mike Mandel Hypnosis. So the way to get there is m.me, which is always the short form for any Facebook Messenger link. So m.me/Mike Mandel Hypnosis. That's a URL that will get you automatically to our Facebook Messenger. Or if you're in the Facebook Messenger app, just use the @ symbol followed by the word Mike Mandel Hypnosis. And then when you're chatting with us, type the word interview all by itself. Just type interview, and our chat bot will respond with, hey, would you like the 5-hour interview series between Mike Mandel and Igor Ledachovsky? And it'll basically sign you up for it and send you all 5 hours of that interview for free on autopilot. It's kind of cool. So go ahead and do that.
Excellent, buddy. That's good.
All right, what's next?
Well, I want to talk about failure and criticism just being feedback. This is a really, really interesting thing, and this has helped me immeasurably in my own life. I used to take criticism personally. I really did. It would hurt, if somebody saw a hypnosis show and made critical remarks, especially my wife.
Oh.
Then I asked her once, I said, do you see your task in life that I present ideas to you and you stomp all over them to see whether or not they'll survive? And she said, pretty much.
Yeah.
I was devastated because in a creative state, that's about the worst thing. But listen, guys, one of the most powerful things that you can do is treat failure as just feedback. You found something that didn't work.
Yes.
It's another step towards success. And the other one is criticism. Criticism is only information. And we're going to tie this in with the next point. But anytime someone criticizes you, just immediately recognize it's information, put your feelings aside, and listen for the positive in it. Listen for the take-home, the takeaway that will help you through this situation.
That is so true. And it reminds me of a lesson that I learned from you, and I don't know where you learned it, but the idea that when you get overly emotional, it actually makes you stupider in that
human givens
moment,
theory.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you a quick example from yesterday. It was on the flight home, and I figured, I'm going to get up and go use the bathroom, the washroom, the toilet. And
too much information.
It just so happened that the cart that was serving the drinks was literally just behind my seat. And of course, the restrooms were at the back of the plane. I had to end up standing there waiting about 20 minutes for the cart to make its way all the way to the back of the plane so that I could use the restroom. And there was it was fine because there was another lady there doing the same, and we just talked for the 20 minutes, and it was a great conversation. And the stewardess on the plane, I said when I got to the back, I said, it's okay that I'm here because now I'm close to the wine cart. I can order a bottle of wine from you. And she says, which kind? I said, red, please. And I went into to use the restroom. When I came out, she had it waiting for me, and she didn't charge me a penny. She just gave it to me. And she said, no, nice. I want to thank you because so many people, they just do not tolerate this well, the idea that they have to wait. And I said, I realize I can't fly over the cart or anything like that. She goes, no, you wouldn't believe, though. Some people have tried climbing over the seats to get around and all this stuff. And I said, that makes total sense because, and I said to her on our podcast, we've discussed this often, that when people get emotional, they get stupid. They don't logically connect the idea that the cart is, let's say 24 inches wide. The aisle is 26 inches wide. There ain't no space for you to get past. Right. Just wait. Be patient.
No, that's that interesting thing, Chris, because this is human givens theory, Griffin and Tyrrell. They point out as psychologists that start again. Exactly.
We are not editing that out, Ross.
No, exactly what you said. That
what?
The whole point of it is when you go into any emotional state, whether it's extreme anger, even somebody who falls in love,
even comedy, even
comedy.
laughter.
We tend to literally become stupider, and this manifests itself in one way, which is black and white thinking. Notice when people get angry, they go into black and white thinking right away because they're experiencing a strong kinesthetic state, a strong emotion, and the shades of meaning in between disappear. If you want to be able to get to all those shades of gray, and there's a lot more than 50 of them, you've got to be able to make sure that you can keep your cool. And by keeping your cool, you're going to dissociate from what's happening. That's one of the powerful things here, because when you are flipping from black and white thinking, you'll know this. You'll hear it with other people when they get angry. You'll say something like, well, I don't think we should leave just yet. Now, if you're in a good state, you'll go, oh, okay, when would you like to leave? But when you go to black and white thinking, it goes from not leaving yet to, oh, sure, let's stay here till midnight. Which is so extreme. You know,
exactly.
It's 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah. One of you wants to leave the party early or something like that.
Talk about dissociating, how that's useful. And then we got a break.
Yeah, this idea of dissociating, it really just means, and you can think of this often in terms of the visual sense or visual system. So if you dissociate, it means that, again, using visual imagery, you imagine seeing yourself in a scenario. It could be a future scenario, or it could be a past scenario that pissed you off or something like that.
Right.
Or something that you're nervous about that's coming up in the future, right? So one or the other. Well, if you see yourself in that situation, rather than what would normally be if you were associated, it would be like the cameras inside your skull pointing out of your eyeball holes. There's a technical term. So imagine like literally you're looking through your own eyes. That's associated. If you see yourself in the image, that's dissociated. And whenever you dissociate, you tend to reduce emotions.
Yes, you cannot. And the greater the dissociation, the greater the distance, the more the emotions are reduced.
And that's where we come to submodalities. So that is. I'm doing it too.
Caught it.
Submodalities. Yeah, it's like a disease, right? So if you see yourself in that image and it's a bit distant and maybe a bit grainy or a bit black and white,
the emotions
or it's
disappear.
got a frame around it or something like that, yeah, you can really just dull the emotions. It won't necessarily go away entirely, but it's quite effective. So if you're having that kind of conversation with somebody, you can just slip into a bit of NLP speak and say, just imagine that you're about to have that meeting with your boss. It's about next week, and you're about to walk into your boss's office, and just see yourself about to enter that office. And what is it that you're feeling as you're watching yourself about to do that?
Right.
And you'll get an answer that will probably find the other person is less emotional already.
And this ties in too, that's a good point. This ties in very well with the criticism aspect of life. If someone criticizes you, if you immediately dissociate, imagine you're watching the conversation between the two of you.
Yes.
The negative emotion will disappear.
Watch that criticizer speaking to you like you're watching it on a movie screen or something like that, as opposed to imagining that the person is literally right in front of your face speaking to you.
Exactly. Well, we're at about the 33-minute mark, Chris, and we've had a special bulletin. This just came in minutes ago, so I'd like you to bring us up to date.
And now, a special bulletin. This just in from Storm Rider David Frenulum of Port Perry, Ontario. Hey guys, I love the podcast, even when you talk over each other too much. I never thought I'd be writing you, but something happened last night that's just too weird. I was dining at a local restaurant, Colonel Mustard's, which is a great place for food, and we always jokingly call it Colonel Bastards, which I find funny for some reason. Anyway, I ordered my usual keto-friendly double burger with cheese, bacon, and extra pickles, and also a side of salad with blue cheese dressing. When the meal arrived, I noticed that the server had brought me fries by mistake. But I said it was no big deal. I got her to bring me malt vinegar and loaded the fries with salt too. I was sitting in the heated and glassed-in patio in the back, and just as I raised the first morsel to my mouth, someone banged on the window next to me. It startled me, and I dropped the fork on the floor. There was a man in a NASA ball cap outside, and he smiled and waggled his finger at me, clearly chiding me for eating such a high-carb side dish. I couldn't see his hair, but I knew that it was definitely a traditional brush-cut style so popular in the 50s and 60s. It was Virgil Gus Grissom. He smiled as I swept the fries off of my plate and onto the floor and kicked them down the vent. Then he climbed into a red Tesla Model X and practically broke the sound barrier as the car silently blasted up Water Street. I don't know why he was so concerned with what I was eating, but it was nice to know that he was looking out for me. Mr. Frenulum went on to state that Grissom was wearing a World War II bomber jacket, gray jeans, and tennis shoes. He looked very fit and toned, but a little tired around the eyes. Frenulum was so shocked by the apparition that he spent the night in a nearby grain elevator. So there you have it, Mike. Grissom was only a few kilometers from where we are now.
Unbelievable, Chris. Grissom is clearly listening to the Brain Software podcast. Another thing, Chris, that I think we need to look at is the use of a couple of clean language questions, which are called Jedi questions, as Judy Reese calls them.
Let's do it. All right. So Clean Language is the book where you can get all of this from.
Yeah, this is David Grove's method of using language to elicit the metaphor that the other person is maybe not consciously aware of. Apparently, we speak in metaphors about 1 every 6 to 10 seconds.
I think something like 6 metaphors a minute on average.
It's ridiculous.
It's
amazing.
Something,
or 1 every 6 seconds, which would be 10 a minute.
So, and this is really interesting, and I want to point out, when you told me this, I thought, no way. And then I bought the book, and I read the intro, and I saw the same comment, and I thought, I thought about it. I thought, that's a lot of metaphors.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Well, I started, of course, paying attention and realized, damn, yes, it's true. People are throwing metaphors out all the time, like I just did. Throwing metaphors out. We'll point them out, ding, every time we do one. But, okay, go on from here.
So the questions are things like, what kind of throwing is that throwing, Chris? Well, it's what kind of is a great question. And anything else about. So if someone says, I dealt with a client a couple of years ago, and she told me her life felt like a concentration camp.
Oh.
And I said, what kind of concentration camp? Now, I don't like to unpack bad metaphors, but she said, it's one where I can't think and I'm not free to. And she would say, so what would you like to have happen? So we start to open the package now. And that's a wonderful version of what do you want? I actually think the clean language version is better. What would you like to have happen? And the reason that's so powerful is the implication is the subject doesn't have to do it. There's no onus on them to make anything happen. It's something that just happens. I highly recommend the book on clean language by Judy Reese and the original work by David Grove. It's just it's awesome. When you ask what kind of is that or anything else about that, these questions will unpack metaphors, especially really good ones. So a person said, I got out of that party and I just felt like I was flying. What kind of flying was that flying?
Yeah.
Oh, I was in a first class private Learjet. Like anything else about that Learjet? And as they start to unpack it, the metaphor will become real for them and will become applicable to their life.
Yeah, and you can do the same thing if somebody says, well, I just really feel stuck. And you can ask them, well, what kind of stuck is that? Or what else about stuck? And they will flesh out the metaphor for you. Oh, there's a metaphor. They'll flesh it out for you. And then you can start asking them the more empowering questions to draw that metaphor towards a process that makes their life better.
And again, we don't recommend you do the black magic of unpacking bad metaphors. It just very quickly transition and skip over those like stepping stones.
Yeah, so how far do you go with that, Mike? Let's talk about that quickly. If someone says, well, I feel really stuck in this job.
Stuck isn't too bad. You can see what kind of stuck is that.
Right,
but
it's not going to unpack a trauma.
Right, now in my early days doing this, saying what kind of concentration camp wasn't the best kind of question. I should have gone immediately, which was my next step. What would you like to have happen? Well, I'd like to feel a freedom, a floating freedom. What kind of floating is it? Like this sort of thing. You lead them out of the negative into the positive.
How would you like to feel instead?
Right.
Yeah.
Instead.
What has to happen for that to...
Which leads us, Chris, to our empowering question of the day. Take it away.
All right. So we've already hit the near end of this amazing podcast. And where is the empowering question in my notes? Here it is. What is the biggest positive change you've ever made in your life? And what can you still learn from it today? So looking back over the years, what changes have you made? Or what change have you made that's so powerful that it's still affecting you today in ways you hadn't even noticed until now?
Nice. Excellent. I'm going to give you a Meta 5, Chris, and this is called feline audiogenic reflex syndrome.
Oh,
and
I know
the
where
cheetah.
this is going. Yeah.
We have 2 cats. As many of you know, I have my fur kids. I have an Egyptian Mal, which is probably the oldest breed on earth. And I also have a Bengal, my third Bengal, Tesla, named after the scientist, not Chris's fleet. And Tesla, he thinks he's a cheetah. He roars around the house at high speed, and we call him the cheetah, and he really likes that. Well, one day, my wife was chasing the cheetah around the house, and she had a cat toy that made this real rattly sound. I'm going to do this in the speaker. This kind of sound.
It's a microphone. It's a microphone, not a speaker.
Actually, they're exactly the same thing. It's a speaker in reverse. Check your
There is no difference.
There is no difference. We are not witches. So... Anyway, the cheetah was, playing with Heather, and she went in the kitchen. A minute later, I was upstairs, and she yelled, "Mike, come down quick. The cheetah's having a seizure." I freaked out. This is my boy. I ran down. The cat was having a horrendous seizure. Most of them last about 15 to 20 seconds. We're talking, epilepsy in the limbic system, or wherever it is, electrical disturbance. And it went on and on and on. And we phoned our vet and said, he's having a seizure. And we have a holistic vet who's amazing. And he said, bring him in immediately. So we rushed over there. They gave him Valium and some other stuff, and they had already arranged for him to go immediately to a veterinary neurologist, which, as you can imagine, Chris, wasn't expensive at all.
No, of course not.
The cat's seizure lasted probably half an hour. It was terrifying because he's just twitching and rigid and weird. They couldn't find anything. They said, do you want him to stay overnight? They said, we can put him on a seizure watch. It's going to cost you this and this, then an MRI tomorrow. We're talking thousands of dollars. Now, I love my cat, and I'd pay the money. But I said, what would you do if it was your cat? The amazing communication skills.
That's a great question.
I'm tying all this into communication skills. And the neurologist said, take him home, keep your iPhone handy. If he has another seizure, film it so we can see it from beginning to end, and just keep an eye on him. Took him home. He came out of it, never had a seizure. Everything was great until last week. And last week, I was cooking in the kitchen. Oh, by the way, Heather had researched it and found out he was suffering from something called FARS, F-A-R-S, Feline Audiogenic Reflex Syndrome. And some cats have seizures in response to noise, the most common one being shaking aluminum foil. And she'd been shaking it with this cat toy, and that's what caused it. Nobody knows what. Crinkly sound. But there's another one. And I do the cooking in my house, and Tesla was up on the island in the kitchen. We always say, pretend you don't go up there, when there's people around. And I was banging some mashed potatoes or mashed sweet potatoes out of a pot with a spoon, banged the side of the pot loud, and Heather yelled, "Oh no, the cheetah's having a seizure." Again, turn around. He leapt off, was on the floor like twitching. And, it's like, he's okay, he's just waving. He's saying he doesn't need any help. This one only lasted about 20 seconds, but it was triggered by me banging on this pot. So we've been very, very careful since then, and we do not trigger any more seizures.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Brain Software Podcast. This has been episode 120, part 3 of our mini-series in communications. Email us, info@MikeMandelHypnosis.com, and tell us that you appreciate us not talking over each other so much anymore and adding tremendous value and keeping the promotional content to a minimum. Aluminum foil. And go to MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events to find out about our live events. And if you're not interested because you can't come to Toronto, it's too far for whatever reason, make sure you go to the homepage, MikeMandelHypnosis.com, and grab the ebook, the Brain Software ebook. You're going to love it. Thanks, and good night!
Oh, this again! Oh, yeah. It's the Chris and Jeff Show.
Chris and Jeff Show.
The Chris and Jeff Show.
The Jeff and Chris Show.
Not the Jeff and Chris Show.
No, not that.
It's the Chris and Jeff Show.
Because Chris comes first.
Chris and Jeff Show.
Chris and Jeff Show.
More like awesome show. Riders on the storm.
Chris and Jeff Show.
Chris and Jeff
Show.
Riders on the storm.
You are a storm rider.
On the storm. More like awesome show.